So let me introduce this Burnet County panel. I am so honored. So I met Judge Nelson through this mental health work and specifically through the legislative session. And she has been such an incredible resource. Depth of knowledge, depth of passion, depth of care. She calls me back at 10 p.m. sometimes. It is amazing, and I'm so grateful for her. So Judge Roxanne Nelson has served as Justice of the Peace in Burnet County since her appointment in 2005 and was subsequently elected twice, no doubt. She has also served as Associate Judge for the cities of Granite Shoals and Burnet, as Magistrate in the Burnet County Jail, and as Indigent Defense Coordinator, blah, 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 and mental health liaison. Working in the jail provided Judge Nelson the opportunity to observe the dire circumstances that incarcerated persons with mental illness and IDD face, as well as the challenges that Texas sheriffs face as they try to provide those needs. Judge Nelson is a JCMH commissioner and the Burnet County representative to the Bluebonnet Trails Community Services Board of Trustees. Judge Nelson is this session's moderator to facilitate the discussion about hypothetical situations in her community and how to effectively manage and promote successful outcomes, even when resources are scarce. Colleen Davis, where are you, Colleen? All right, is an assistant county attorney at the Burnet County Attorney's Office. Ms. Davis is a leader in her office where she oversees responsibility for the misdemeanor criminal cases, juvenile cases, protective orders, and appeals. In each of these areas, she gives a special focus to the mental health concerns as they arise and tries to use creative, out-of-the-box methods to bring about positive resolutions. All right, Jonathan, and is it Lemuel? How do you say your last name?
Lemuel.
Lemuel. All right. Jonathan Lemuel is a director of jail diversion at Bluebonnet Trails Community Services and has worked for the organization for 17 years. Mr. Lemuel liaises, that was a hard one for me, between Bluebonnet Trails and local jails by facilitating the discharge of inmates whose offenses are a direct result of mental health symptoms, provides training for law enforcement, jailers, and legal professionals, and also facilitates continuity of care for Bluebonnet Trails patients at state hospitals. And Michelle Moore. All right. Michelle Moore has served as the Chief Public Defender for Burnet County for 9 years. Prior to this position, she worked in the Dallas County Public Defender's Office for 16 years, trying cases ranging from DWI to death penalty capital murder. Part of her tenure at Dallas County was serving as the DNA attorney for the office, where she participated in exonerating 9 individuals from prison for crimes they did not commit. Ms. Moore's continued work with the drug court team in Burnet and with exonerees has fueled her passion for bettering the Texas criminal justice system. With me, welcome this panel.
Thank you, Judge Liston. So she mentioned it, it's that word, resources. We have all talked about the lack of resources, we've thought about the lack of resources, or we've heard other people talk about the lack of resources. We don't have them, or we need them. As of Wednesday, there are about 1,831 individuals on a wait list for a state hospital bed. We need resources. I don't know what they all are, but I can tell you that rural counties especially are impacted by the challenge of holding some of these individuals in our county jails. I know our sheriffs over here will not disagree with me on that. You know, in Texas, we still have 71 counties that don't even have a hospital. We have about 70 counties that don't have a psychiatrist located in their county. Now, thankfully, one of the offshoots of this very bad pandemic was the use of Zoom and telemed, and that's helping to bridge that gap for services, but it's still not the answer. So as these challenges are felt across the state, I hate to keep pointing out rural areas, but our urban areas do have some resources that our rural areas just do not. And our LMHAs, unfortunately, are the only ones sometimes that are serving the needs of rural mentally ill persons or persons suffering from an intellectual or developmental disability. So we thank them for stepping in and taking care of that for the rural counties. Now, speaking of Burnet County, this panel of compassionate professionals, they work together and have been working together for years to come up with innovative solutions for those people who are justice involved in our county. We do not have a mental health court. We don't even have a pretrial services department. And so they get together regularly, they discuss the cases, and they try to come up with the best solution for each individual defendant that needs to be taken care of. Also, I want to brag a little bit on Michelle Moore. She recently has undertaken the expansion of her public defender's office and will also be doing a regional program that takes in Llano County and Blanco County. Also, I want to say a little bit about Colleen. The woman is a wonderful mother. What does that have to do with anything? She's not just mothering her children, she's mothering everybody in the community that needs help, especially those with mental health issues or children that are in need. And then down there at the end, Jonathan has taught me most of everything that I know. I've been working with Jonathan now for about 11 years, talking about answering phones. He's on speed dial, and he always answers me. It doesn't matter if it's day, night, weekend, or holiday. And so now I'm going to let Michelle start by talking about a case, maybe a couple cases, that they've worked together as a team on to come up with very creative ideas for diversion, treatment, and anything else sometimes. Sometimes these individuals need housing, clothing, and they work together to provide all of these things. So, Michelle Moore.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Thank you all for having us and allowing us to talk to you about our experiences. I hope that we bring something to the table that you can use. I think the bottom line is creativity. It's just thinking outside the box and not burning out so much that you cannot come up with ideas. So I do think, first of all, you have to take care of yourself. That said, I came from Dallas County where we had a lot of resources. I could always get a bus ticket for one of my clients. I could always find a shelter for them to stay in or found housing for them. We had a vast clothes closet. I could always find some clothes for them. So I go from there to start a public defender's office in Burnet County. Wow. Just like Judge Nelson said. So everybody was great. But we don't have a mental health court. We did not have mental health caseworkers. We're about to get one. Yay. So excited. But let me tell you the positives that we had. We had a lot of people who would think outside the box. So I got to work with the jail liaison team from Bluebonnet Trails. And I honestly I have one assigned to the county right now, Nathan Dentino. I told him I was going to shout out for him. I call him every day. And just sometimes it's to bounce ideas off of him. Let's think of something creative. Sometimes it's, will you please go see this person? I also can call these guys. I can call Judge Nelson. I can call Colleen. I can call Jonathan, just to bounce ideas off of them. And don't think I wasn't doing it this morning, too, as I'm asking Jonathan about a case. So they're always there. They're always willing to think outside the box. And I think this whole presentation boils down to creativity. And just because somebody says we can't do it, doesn't mean you can't. It means let's find a way to get there. Let's find a way to take care of the client. I want to tell you about a case. I'm going to call him Al. He was a little bit of a different case for us. Al was picked up outside of his RV in Burnet County. He was waving around a gun, threatening his neighbors. He obviously was having some mental health issues, but that particular police agency is not very skilled at handling mental health cases. They charged him with possession of a firearm by a felon. He had to have one prior case. The magistrate assigned me to the case. I try to go see this person within 24 hours. I want to see what their mental state is. I want to see how much information they can give me and what can I do for them? What can I do to ease their situation? What can I do to work through this case in the best way possible? Al was competent when I went and talked to him, but he obviously was looking off. He was suffering from some delusions, I believed. So, of course, my first call on the way out of the jail is to my jail liaison, Nathan. And I asked Nathan for his opinion. I wanted him to go see Al and get his opinion because he's so much better at like weighing out options than I am. So he put him on the list. He agreed with me, competent, but he also definitely needed to be on the medications that he had not been on in some time. And Al would tell you he refused to take the medications. He just didn't like how they made him feel. So we had to get him on the telemed list, but we were able to do that fairly quickly, get him on medications, which made the world of difference. In the meantime, I go back and contact the family because Al was unwilling to give me a lot of context about what was going on with him. The family could. So they talked to me about the fact that Al was a veteran, that he had been honorably discharged, that he began to have mental health issues after his first tour of duty. And so he came back. They did try to put him on meds after his honorable discharge. He just didn't want to do it. He didn't like the way they made him feel. They made him lose control. Al was not my most patient person. He wanted immediate results. And so it was just a difficult thing. Nathan helped me come up with a dual diagnosis plan because Al was self-medicating. Instead of taking the medication, he would self-medicate with methamphetamine and alcohol. And so with the dual diagnosis plan, we were able to sell that to the DA, and this is not Ms. Davis. My DA is not a big fan of mental health diagnosis. He is not somebody who's very sympathetic to that. So you definitely have to prep to get him to realize that this plan might be good. You really have to work it. So we were able to get Al to a rehab facility through the VA domiciliary because he did have the honorable discharge. We did end up doing a probation that had him taking his meds, continuing with treatment. And with Al, if you had it on paper, and this is something that I discovered after several visits with him, if he had things on paper, then that provided a structure for him that he could follow. And so he would follow that structure and has been very successful at this point. I wanted to tell you, we have some other things out there. I mean, when I'm working with Ms. Davis, it's very easy. I'm just going to tell you that because she definitely believes in getting them help, that we can end the revolving door process. We sometimes can work to get them out on a PR bond and give pretrial conditions and use sometimes as a pretrial condition. Maybe they need anger management. Maybe they need some specific counseling. So a lot of my people, if they've got the structure, they will actually go through and do it. But it takes kind of a village to figure out what all we need for that person to do. Sometimes we can get them out with a PR bond if they are dual diagnosis and do a specific IOP program, intensive outpatient program. Bluebonnet Trails has been great in working with us. They have put somebody in the jail that can actually come and start the intensive outpatient program, which means that I get a head start with my person. If I can get them stable and wow, if I could get them for the first step where they say, I've got a problem, wow, I mean, we're off and running. With Colleen, a lot of times what I end up doing is we will do an MHMR probation, or on occasion we'll end up doing a deferred prosecution where if they finish out the terms that we set out, then the case will be dismissed. So we try to put that in good, solid boundaries where they have a specific time period where they have to get the MHMR evaluation and/or treatment. So we try to treat everybody as an individual, and we try to cater those specific needs to the outcome. So, and with that, I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Michelle. So it's probably kind of weird to see a prosecutor speaking at a mental health thing, right? Especially with a defense attorney. Are there any other prosecutors here in the room in person? Okay, there's a couple. All right. Not a lot of us, though, because it's pretty rare to see a prosecutor doing this. But you have to keep in mind that the primary duty of any prosecutor is not to obtain convictions, it's not to win, and it is not to punish anyone. The primary duty of the prosecutor is to see that justice is done. And justice is not always convictions. Sometimes justice is looking at the person, finding the underlying issue, and helping them resolve it. And it's a little bit easier to do as a misdemeanor prosecutor. I do have that luxury because I don't have violent criminals. I have people who are struggling, regardless of the crime. If you're doing misdemeanors, you have someone who's struggling with something. So it is a little bit easier for me. On the plus side, what I keep trying to tell everyone is that if we can't focus on the felonies because our district attorneys just don't feel like it's an appropriate way to resolve cases, that's okay. Let's focus on the misdemeanors, because if we focus on them now, long-term, we're not going to have as many felonies. If we treat them and get that underlying condition under control, the hope is that they won't end up back in jail and won't end up in that prison pipeline. So I know it's frustrating working with DAs who just don't see it that way, but I think if we think long-term, it'll get better. I have it easy. Michelle, Jonathan, our mental health deputies, they do all the heavy lifting in these mental health cases. I just have to be willing to think outside the box and be creative to find solutions for these folks that meet those goals. So I want to speak briefly, and I'm going to try to cut my time down a little so that Jonathan has some time, about 3 cases that we did where I think we thought creatively and did something successfully. The first is a gentleman named Kevin. Kevin has parents who are absolutely enabling. They move him between their house in one part of Burnet County to a house they bought for him in another part of Burnet County to a group home in Travis County. And when he gets too angry and difficult, they just move him to the next place. And so he doesn't like to take his meds. He doesn't like the way they make him feel. So he doesn't. And when they get frustrated with him, they just move him on. But Dad was getting fed up with this. He reached out, and we were able to do court-ordered outpatient mental health services. So rather than trying to wait for a bed anywhere, trying to get him placed somewhere, we just did court-ordered services. And he is ordered by the court to take his meds. If he doesn't take his meds, I can get a warrant and I can detain him until he does take his meds. We work with our mental health deputies who transport him to Bluebonnet trails in order to take his meds. And one of the things that I think is really effective is that for his meds, we have the option of injectables. So once we get him level, he tends to stay level and be more willing to take his meds. So court-ordered outpatient has been a godsend with this client. We've done it for the past 4 years. I just filed an application yesterday to do it again for the 5th year. Each application and order is good for 1 year. But that's a really effective program, and we've used it with other defendants as well. And folks who aren't defendants, they may not have a current criminal case, but they have an ongoing psych issue or mental health issue. We're able to keep that going and keep getting them treatment. And it's a pretty simple process once you've learned how to do it. I'm happy to share that process with anyone who's not familiar with it outside of this. Another thing that we're doing this right now with a gentleman named Jake, hoping to get our district attorney on board with it, is the dismiss and transfer process. So if you have someone who is incompetent, you can transfer the case over to your probate court, get them placed, and working with Jonathan, he said, we don't need to wait for a state hospital to do that. We can find placement in some sort of private facility, so we don't have that long delay. So we get them placed and we dismiss our criminal cases. That requires working with our victims, making sure that they understand why we're doing that, what we're doing that for, why there's a benefit in that. As a prosecutor, I am dismissing without prejudice. I know Michelle's not crazy about that, but I could theoretically bring the case back if this treatment option, this dismiss and transfer, isn't successful. So that's another option you have to get people out of that wait for beds. It's going to clear up the state hospital beds for people who really need those state hospital beds and get these other folks treatment faster. That gentleman is also having some issues in the hospital while we await this process. And so I also learned recently about a new process where the court can allow the jail to give him his meds against his will. We're in the process of doing hearings on that to see if we can get that done so that we can hopefully try to get him stabilized even before we send him off to placement. So there are a lot of options available in the Health and Safety Code if you go looking for them. And you just got to try it and see what happens. Be willing to call the doctors, call your local mental health authority people, get people in the courtroom in front of a judge, and see what you can do. The third case that I want to talk about is a woman named, I'm going to call Evelyn, but she doesn't like to go by Evelyn. She likes to go by the name Loving Heart. She thinks that is the name that was given to her by God, and that's the only name she'll respond to. I have one police agency that consistently likes to arrest her for failure to ID because she will not give her name of Evelyn. She's not a danger to herself. She's not a danger to others. They come in contact with her because she's hanging out outside the gas station. Like, she's not harming anyone, but she refuses to give her legal name. She gives this other name, and that's an offense. So we can't really do medication to fix this. And convicting her isn't going to do any good. Sending her to jail doesn't do any good. Putting her on probation's not going to achieve anything. My solution, and I'm trying to find a lawyer who will do it, is a petition for name change. If we legally change her name to Loving Heart, when she gives that name to law enforcement, it will no longer be an offense. So yes, we can follow things that are in the code. We can follow 46B. We can go to the Health and Safety Code. We can also think about what's the real issue here? What is causing this? And is there a different way that I can fix it? Because sometimes there are other mechanisms available to us. We just need to be open to thinking of something different and something new. I want to leave Jonathan time, so I know that those were all really short and really quick, but I am happy to talk to anyone by email, by phone. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for your time.
See, that's the mom in her. There's no criminal charge pending, but that's the mom taking care of somebody in our community. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, I guess I'm up. I'm the last person here. So all the cases, I usually come in kind of at the end once my staff has been in the jail and started to work with them. I cover 8 counties with 4 people. So that means that I don't have someone in every county. So for Burnet County, where the cases that we're talking about today, so we'll start with the last case that Colleen talked about. The young lady who was in the jail, she refused to talk to her attorney. She said she's not going to sign anything that man created, and everything that she was talking about was all had a lot of religiosity to it. So as I came in and Nathan called me and said, this lady won't talk to me, and that's usually what I get from my staff is somebody won't talk to them. And they call me, I come over to the jail and we sit down and we start to have these conversations. Because my staff is there and they're trying to get to the root of the problem. I come in, I just want to have a conversation and I can get my questions usually answered. So this lady says she's not going to do anything. So I reach out to Colleen. I was like, this is a Class B. By the time she gets to the hospital, she's probably going to time out. Is there anything that we can do different? And, Colleen said, well, I gave them an offer, but she won't sign for it. And then as I talked to her about it, she said she wouldn't sign because the name on the paper was not her. But as we look into, Odyssey and different systems where people have all these AKAs, I asked Colleen, could we just put her AKA on there along with her regular name? And she signed it. So we were able to move that case on down the road instead of waiting for her to go to the hospital, time out, and basically spend a lot of money, and the court still didn't have nothing that they could do with that case. So as I come in and as I talk to my team, I talk to them about, what can we do outside of the box to help kind of move this down the line? As Judge Nelson said, there's over 1,800 people waiting to get into the state hospital. And that number is steadily growing every day. So how do we be able to clean that pipeline up a little bit with getting those people moved out of the jail? So with the other case that Colleen was talking about here, we're working really diligently on trying to figure out, with the court-ordered medication and also getting him placed into a hospital on a civil commitment, on a dismiss and transfer. This guy does really, really well when he's on his medication. He was on parole there for a little while, and while he was on parole, he took his shot. He came in religiously, but when parole was over with, he stopped taking his medication. He didn't want to comply with us anymore. So if we can get him on court-ordered medication and we can just keep renewing like we're doing with the other guy, I think this guy could be successful out in the community. So with forced medication, a lot of jails are kind of reluctant to compel someone, but under 46B, they get a hearing, they get all those different things, and they can still be compelled into jail. And with my team, we meet with all of our 46Bs across the 8 counties every week. We want to know if you're doing better, then we want to get you moved off the list. We reach out to the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and say, hey, I think your guy is ready to go to court. Why don't we get him recomped? Instead of them just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting to get into the state hospital. Then we can do something different with the case. So I really think outside of the box, and I tell my team to think outside of the box. Don't go with the traditional ways of doing things. Because if we're going to divert someone out, let's put a plan together, a solid plan together, where when I present it to Colleen or any prosecutor across our 8 counties, that we have a solid plan for this person to be successful and not return back to the jail. I can't say every case I presented was a successful case, because then it wouldn't be true. I have had my hiccups in my 17 years of doing this, but the majority of my cases that I've put together and we presented to the prosecutor with a plan for this person to be successful, they have been successful out in the community and they have not returned back into the correctional system. Some people have went on to be very, very productive persons in society and actually have come in and became peers and work for us now at Bluebonnet. But they had a bump in the road, so how do we get them over that bump and be able to become successful and be able to move on down the road? I'm available, as Judge Nelson said. If you have my number and you call me, I'm going to come out and help you. My staff know as we kind of work through things this morning. I'm actually texting back and forth with one of my staff in the jail right now who's trying to figure out, how do we get this guy out of the jail and moved out to the community. So I'm available to them, and I'm willing to go and help them wherever they are in any situation that they are in. As far as the Burnet County and any of the other 8 counties, they already know if they reach out to me, I'm coming, and we're going to figure out how to divert that person out. As far as law enforcement on the street, I'm willing to help out our law enforcement. Where can we divert someone instead of going into the jail? What are those resources out there that they may not know about? Our respite center or somewhere else down there where we can take someone instead of taking them into the jail. Just thinking outside of the box. How do we move those people to a different resource?
And one thing we didn't mention, but I think is important, you need to know how to contact the people in your area who are doing this. If you are trying to call their office phone number, you are never going to get through to them, ever. We all pretty much text and go, we need to talk about this, call me. That's how we get hold of each other. So if you don't have contact information for those people in your area, I strongly recommend get that direct contact information.
And Jonathan had said something about working with law enforcement. And so we are slowly but surely reaching out to the law enforcement and getting them to that point where they'll call us when they pick somebody up and say, hey, I've got somebody, they're in bad straits. What do you think? I'm sure they call Jonathan and go, hey, what's your opinion? With me, sometimes it's just, I just want to let you know, so-and-so's off their meds. We're going to take them to the behavioral unit, but I want to give you a heads up. Or we're taking them to the jail. Let me just give you a description of what's going on. I just think when we have that buy-in from the police, it just makes such a difference and we can move on the case so much faster.
Law enforcement is always the first line of, they're always the first people to encounter anyone. So if we're able to educate law enforcement and be able to be there when they need us, because it's a lot easier to head off to the jail and be able to drop them off and be done in 15 minutes. But it may take us as an LMHA a little longer to actually get there. And with, different software now, or they can actually call us in Life Size or Zoom or any of those other softwares out there, and we can actually work with them right there on the scene and make those recommendations where they don't have to go to jail. I mean, that's what Sandra Bland is all about. You know, what are those resources that are out there other than hauling someone into the jail? If there is an alternative, then we should look at those alternatives.
We're almost at time, but I see the lady in green wanting to ask a question.
Morning, everybody. I am Judge Yolanda Huff. I preside over criminal bench in San Antonio, and I also preside over the mental health court. And I got through law school with 3 kids and a single mom. So talking about shooting budget, I could say that from my own heart. So when I became
Oh, here comes your microphone. All right. So, judge, single mom, 3 kids, law school.
single mom, I did law school. Okay. Well, I had a lot of teenagers, so they sound strange, so I don't think I need a microphone. When I became over preside of the mental health court, there were a lot of things that I saw that needed improvements about the mental health court. So how was I going to do this? Because all these specialty courts operate on a very, very tight budget. Now, thinking outside the budget, what I came up with, we started the Love Fund. That's what we affectionately call it. I would marry people, charge them $60, and all the money that I made would go to the mental health court. And we were able to buy all new cap and gowns because all these specialty courts have 2 graduation ceremonies a year. So we cap and gowns. I brought T-shirts for all the participants, pro-social events, and the teeny little things that people don't think of, like someone up here mentioned, like a birthday card for the participants, or when someone has a baby, a card. And now, talk about a shoestring budget. Dollar Tree is my friend, my very friend. I love Dollar Tree. And Dollar Tree will put all their things out for, the graduation of high schools at May. So what we would do is just buy everything that for our May graduation and for December, because in December, Dollar Tree will not put out any graduation ceremony. I mean, just really think out of the box how you can improve your program on the shoestring budget, and thinking out it works. Like we use that Love Fund for so many things. Now, as a judge, I cannot ask for donations for things, but when I do marry people, I'll say, thanks for your donation. This is going to help the mental health court, and people really appreciate that, and that's truly thinking outside the box for me as a judge. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm really loving what you guys are talking about this morning.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge.
And Judge Nelson, anything else you guys all want to share?
So one of the things that makes this group work so well is processes. Our magistrate has appointing authority. So Michelle gets appointed to the cases that qualify immediately. They haven't left the jail yet when Michelle gets notification that she's been appointed. We use a 1622 order in order to get help for these individuals in a common sense manner. We're not sending that 1622 order to our LMHA for everyone who answers yes to one of those screening questions. We see them at magistration, we evaluate them ourselves. We're not mental health professionals, but there are some cues that people give off. But that 1622 order goes out right away. But also, in addition to that, a simple process. When they do answer yes to a screening question, the jail staff includes all of us on an email before they're ever even magistrated, so we all have a heads up. So Jonathan's already getting involved, and he's checking to make sure that maybe this is a client and he needs to get a certain caseworker in to see them. Colleen knows to be watching for that case to come her direction, but Michelle's already scheduling out herself to get to that jail and interview that person to make this work properly. If we waited the months, or sometimes on felonies a year, to address these needs, the wheels would fall off. Do you agree, Michelle?
I do.
I think it's a great way to help her get in there and start advocating on behalf of her clients right away. And then Colleen's not waiting for that case to be filed either, because Michelle's contacting her, they're contacting Jonathan, and then they meet monthly, sometimes a little less than that, in order to start talking about these cases already.
And can I?
Absolutely. I was going to turn it over to you, Colleen.
So useful for me, our jail flags them in Odyssey. We've set up flags and case markers in Odyssey so that when we pull that case over into our part of Odyssey, it's flagged and it can be assigned to me, because I don't let anyone else in my office deal with mental health stuff. And so it comes through that way too, even if they haven't been calling me because they didn't need me that early on. So there are ways that you can mark it in your system so that you're aware of it as well.
Then with 1622, being able to do those evaluations and pass that information off. And also, we talked about training. I do law enforcement training. I also train the jailers. And I train the jailers in the jail to understand that, just because you book in 50 people in an hour, were those successful bookings? Did you gather enough information to be able to pass off to the magistrate as you're filling out your paperwork? I mean, if you slow down a little bit and work with the person, you'll be able to get a little more information out of them to be able to pass off so that that jailing will be successful for the rest of your brothers and sisters in the jail. So just educating them. I teach mental health first aid to them, and I do refreshers as they need them. And as they get new forms that come out from the jail commission, I come in and we talk about the mental health aspect of those forms so the jailers understand how to use that form. Because right now, if any of us got arrested and it said, would you lose your job? Everyone in here would say yes. Okay, that's a flag in the jail. But if you get out of jail in a couple of hours and you're able to call your employer, you may be able to keep your job. So should I place you on suicide watch? No.
All right, thank you all for your excellence, Burnet County. Fantastic.